Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. If Charles Bukowski, Sharon, and Billy Collins somehow had a child, my guest today would be it. Described by his inner circle as Poet Laureate of the absurd, he spent the better part of a decade drinking himself silly at the Swinging Door Saloon in Tustin, California. While there, he began writing poetry. He is author of Dispatches from the Swinging Door Saloon, Make It a Double, and Last Call, and his poems have been printed in American, British, and Canadian literary journals. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Randall McNair.
Thank you, Julia. Happy to be here.
Randall, our first question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
That's a great question. I think I was just busy living life, gaining the experience that I write about in my books. I was stuck in a career that I hated, and I knew I wanted to write, but I just couldn't quite break away from the career that I had chosen, which was financial services. And somehow I found this little bar in Orange County in Tustin called the Swinging Door Saloon, and I walked in there and I felt like I was at home. And so I sat there on the bar stool for 10 years, getting drunk and having the time of my life, and writing in the margins of Charles Bukowski's books and Sharon and Billy Collins, and just took it all in as much as I could. And so I then basically walked away from the bar and from writing for 10 years and went to the Southampton Writers Conference in 2019. With Billy Collins. It was the second time that I was able to workshop my poems with him. And I just found a renewed love for the art form and for poetry in general. And I decided I was going to start publishing my poems. And so I did.
Well, I don't know that I've ever heard of poetry being written in a bar. Did you perform the poetry for the other patrons at the Swinging Door?
No, I definitely did not. I'm not a big fan of reading my poetry. I don't really have the cadence. I don't have the breathing techniques down, but I love writing poetry, especially when I'm reading great poetry. And Bukowski was especially prominent on my bar when I was sitting there drinking. And so, yeah, I didn't read many poems there, but I wrote a ton, quite a few.
Well, your poetry has certainly been well received. Amazon reviews are very positive and describe your poetry as enlightening, sad, realistic, and morose. That's all over the board. But you've really touched a nerve with people.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love most about poetry is the ability to dig emotion out of just mundane things. And that's what life is to me. It's about finding the emotion in simple things. And so I try to incorporate as much emotion into my poetry as possible. I like to have it pretty lighthearted, so there's a lot of chuckles in there, I hope. But for the most part, I'm trying to convey whatever emotion I was feeling at the time. And hopefully that's conveyed well enough. I mean, some of those reviews are wonderful. The reviews themselves are poetry to me. So I appreciate you mentioning them.
Are you still hanging out at the saloon?
Not that one. I moved up to the Bay Area in 2011. to take another job in financial services, and it almost killed me. I had stage 3 rectal cancer, and I decided when I beat that I was going to get out of financial services once and for all. And I was able to do that, fortunately. And so, no, I don't go to the Swinging Door as much, although we will be there this coming Saturday, August 13th. I'm having a book launch at Arvita Book Company, which is right across the street from the Swinging Door Saloon. And then I'm going to take everybody across the street and show them where it all went down. So.
Well, I'm wearing my blue jean shirt today in honor of the Swinging Door.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, lots of denim in that bar, that's for sure.
Randall, once you knew you had to write a book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, small press, or did you self-publish?
Well, so at the Southampton Writers Conference in 2019, one of the advantages of signing up for that was that you had time with an agent who you could pitch your book with. And so I did that, and I submitted my pitch, and he chose me to sit with him, but then he passed. And so I was disappointed and discouraged, and I thought, screw that. I'm just going to publish it myself. So I didn't know what I was doing, and I just decided I would do it. And fortunately, I found Amy Collins. She has a podcast, or she did at the time, which was Free Advice Fridays, and now it's run by Carrie Barnum. And so I was introduced to those two ladies, and they made all the difference. They helped me figure out how to publish a book and how to get it out there and how to market it, and couldn't have done it without them. So.
Well, you chose two of the greats there with New Shelves Books. At least Carrie still is now, and she does Free Advice Fridays every Friday, marketing advice. So if anyone wants to tune in, it's New Shelves Books, Free Advice Fridays.
Yeah, I agree.
What about your writing routine, Randall? Are you a morning person or a night person?
That's a good question. I don't really have a routine. I'm kind of a pantser, if you will. I just wait for inspiration, and we'll try and capture whatever emotion is in that inspiration. I write a lot about the muse, just because for me, I feel there is a muse. There's a certain spirit that talks to you and tries to tell you a story. And it's our job as writers to try and capture whatever the muse is saying as honestly and as truthfully as you hear it. And so I don't really write daily. I write whenever I have time and whenever I feel something itching to be written.
Do you believe in writer's block?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I've written poems about writer's block. I think the best way to get out of writer's block is just by writing. Just free write, copy a poem, and just get in the habit of writing, and eventually you'll break through. But for me, writer's block is just more waiting for the muse to strike. And oftentimes I find myself in long periods where I don't write anything, and I need to try and figure out a way to fix that, I think, if I want to be a full-time writer, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Tell us more about meeting with one of your writing idols and being workshopped by him.
Yeah, Billy Collins is just a major force in American poetry, contemporary poetry. He's been so generous with his knowledge of how to write poetry. And so the first time I met him was in 2009 at the Key West Literary Seminars workshop. So I was able to workshop with him there too for a week. And it's just invaluable to sit with a master of the craft, whatever craft you're in, and to just basically absorb their energy. They don't even need to talk or tell you how to write. You just feel it. And so, yeah, it was wonderful. And it's funny because we went to a bar after one of our writing sessions or one of our workshops. And I told him it was always a dream of mine to have a beer with him. And so he sat down and had a beer with me, and it was just awesome. He's just a regular guy, but an awesome poet and a great mentor for me.
I think we belong to such a generous community. Writers are so generous to offer advice or a blurb or to mentor, and I think that's just so important.
I agree. Yeah, especially poets. I think poets, because they, typically are not major names and not household names anyway, and they're not rich necessarily. They tend to just be more regular folk who are willing to chat with you and share what they know. And so I've been fortunate that poetry was my first love, although now I'm starting to lean towards fiction. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I've heard that poetry is having a real renaissance time. It's really making I guess it's never gone away, so it's not making a comeback, but it's become very popular these days, especially with young people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's wonderful. I think poetry, to me, poetry is the entry to any kind of writing. If you can write good poetry, I think you'll be a great author for novels, for nonfiction. I think it just helps with every element of writing. If you can get a good poem down, I think you're on your way.
Well, why don't you tell us about the book you've brought to share with us today? And although you say you can't read your poetry very well, I'm going to ask you to anyway. We want to hear your tone and voice in your book.
Okay. So this first book is the first book that I wrote. It's called Dispatches from the Swinging Door Saloon. That's the actual saloon. That was my wife, now my ex-wife, but yeah. So I thought I'd read you a couple poems about writing that resonate with me. Hopefully they'll resonate with other writers out there. The first one's called A Quick Note About Hope. I don't write with hope. I do it with pen and paper and a tired, open mind. People suggest adding some hope to my poems so the reader can leave with something. I say let the reader leave empty-handed. It's the only way I can be sure I've conveyed myself truthfully. And the reason that resonates with me is because I think so much of poetry especially is quite erudite and fluffy and metaphorical. And if you're looking for meaning in my poems, you're probably not going to find much. You're just going to find a lot of emotion and sensory detail, I guess. So yeah, that's why I like that poem. This next one is called Writer's Block. So you were asking about writer's block. Here you go. Writer's block. I sit in my study taking stock, the books, the gathering of dust, the slant of bookshelf, the jigger of whiskey beneath the brass lamp. It all fits, even I fit, in this computer, and the ballads playing overhead by Springsteen and Bad Company and the Young Dubliners. Everything is as it should be, but the computer screen is blank, and my mind, and all across the room there is no hope, no gleaming white saint sitting in a chair nodding his affirmation. There is just a room full of dusty books I did not write, a bookshelf that will need repair, and a jigger of whiskey, which, like the others before it, promises nothing.
I think those are just lovely. I think they're real and they're raw and I can see it. They're so descriptive. Read us another.
Okay. This one is called On Punctuation. Forget the comma, that little busybody. I propose a toast to the unfettered line, gleeful and whistling as it speeds along in its roadster, flicking cigarette ash out the window, blowing red lights, sending semicolons and asterisks scrambling for cover as the forgotten comma, stiff-lipped and proper, directs traffic in the intersection, its whistle blaring, its little white gloves ordering everything to a halt. Everything but the rogue line which speeds headlong into the night, its long hair blowing in the wind, its yeehaws and hell yeahs echoing down alleyways and into young ladies' ears as they dance in their kitchens alone, drinking wine from the bottle, their parentheses jiggling in their blouses, their imaginations carrying them away to bedrooms full of exclamation points, far away from this nagging fear about missed periods and that lazy brotherhood of pot-bellied question marks known as their husbands.
Wow. That is so clever.
Oh, thank you.
So clever.
I don't, it's funny. I don't know where these poems come from, but like I said, when the muse starts talking to me, I try and get it down as honestly as I can. So,
well, you did a great job, and I think that Billy Collins would be so proud.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
Tell us about your publicity efforts. We writers don't like to market ourselves. What have you done that maybe worked or didn't work?
Yeah. So publicity, I'm not great at publicity. I haven't really done any publicity other than this podcast. And I did one other podcast with Millicent Rogers Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But I have tried to market my books via social media and Amazon. And that's had some success for me. I mean, I've been able to maintain, a top 100 rating in most of the categories that I'm in my books, and so that's been good. I also did a cross country honky tonk / indie bookstore road trip in June of this year, and so I visited just an awful lot of great bars and great bookstores, and so we'll see whether that generates some added sales. As of yet, it hasn't, but it's still just 1 month away. So I think it takes time for them to order books and start selling them. So
I think those are great ideas. I love to think out of the box and try to do something that pertains to our work, but is something that not everybody is doing.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
How long on average does it take you to write a poem or put several together to have a book?
That's a good question. So to write a poem, it can be anywhere from 10 minutes to a week, and then additional time to edit it later on. But for me, creating a book is actually the most fun for me, because then I can take all of these poems that I've written just at different times in my life and with different themes and try and figure out what is the common theme and then build those themes into chapters. So this first book, Swinging Door Dispatches from the Swinging Door Saloon, I have titled On Working, On Writing, On Drinking, On Musing, On Loving, On Living, On Dying. Those are the chapters. So that's what I love most about publishing these books, is getting these poems into some sort of recognizable theme and then putting those themes into the book. So
yeah. Are there any poems that end up on the cutting room floor?
Quite a few. Yeah, quite a few. There's a lot of X's in my books, the margins of Bukowski's books and Billy Collins' books and Sharon Old's books, but there's also just an awful lot of just words on my computer that have no basis in fact or in fiction. They just have no place. So there's an awful lot of extra stuff that does not ever make it into my books.
Well, what is going to be your next project? Are you going to stick with the poetry? You mentioned a possible novel.
Yeah. So on August 13th, I'm releasing my 4th book in the Bar Poems series, which is called One for the Road. It's basically the divorce volume. My wife and I recently split up, so it's going to be a lot heavily on that. And then I have another book that's pretty much ready for the editor, which is on how to write emotional poetry, with some writing prompts and some rules, if you will, on how to write emotional poetry, and a lot of my poetry will be included as well, as examples of what I'm trying to convey. But I do have a love for fiction, and I think if you want to make money as a writer, I think you need to focus on fiction. And so I do have an idea for a coming of age novel about a 12-year-old boy whose mom has basically abandoned the family, and he's being raised by his dad, who's a heavy drinker. And so it's about his life, and hopefully I'll be able to get it on paper. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be quite a challenge.
I bet you can. And that divorce set of poems will resonate with a lot of us. So hopefully that will be very successful as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
Probably hiring New Shelves Books. When I first, I launched a Kickstarter campaign for my first book, not knowing how much money I would need to publish it and to have it edited and get it out there. And so I was able to raise over $10,000, believe it or not, for just a book of debut poetry, which I thought was pretty amazing in the middle of the pandemic, no less. And so I used $5,000 of that to hire New Shelves, and they just did amazing work for me. They taught me everything that I know about publishing and gave me all the tools and resources to get my books in the bookstores and libraries. So that was definitely the best money I ever spent. Although I will say that my next best investment will be to hire Annalisa Parent and join her writing gym to help me figure out how to write a novel, because I really have no knowledge of how to do it, how to start. I've got a couple chapters probably, and I've got the intro and maybe the last scene of the book. But other than that, I have no idea how to put it together. So I'm looking forward to working with Annalisa.
Well, with your descriptions and your poetry, you're not going to have any problem stringing that together to make a novel.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Our writers over 50 are quite a unique set. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
Well, I would just say, don't try and write what you know, write what you feel. For me, especially in poetry, like I said, there's so much erudite and fluff and nonsense out there that's just basically the flexing of someone's mind intellectually. But if you don't connect emotionally with whatever is written, I think it's just a wasted effort. So my feeling is just write what you feel, and if you do that and you do it well, you'll be successful.
Thank you, Randall. I think that's great advice for our writers over 50, and I just wish you the most success. I would love to see your novel come to fruition, so we'll look forward to that and following your career. And I see you're a cat man. I got a good view of a cat right over your shoulder, so that's always impressive when a man loves pet, and I love that.
Yeah, so, these two are sisters, so they keep me busy.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for being with us, Randall, and we're excited to say you're now one of our authors over 50.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate it. Thank you, Julia. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend, and check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing, and remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.